Sounds great.
Great. Okay, so welcome everyone and happy Friday. Adam and I are very excited that you've been able to join us for our webinar on the topic of delivering a fit for future workforce strategy. Definitely so topical in all conversations we're having with clients. Before we do get started, just some housekeeping. This session is currently being recorded, so you may have already seen that message pop up on your screen. If you do experience any general or technical issues, please use the Zoom chat feature and we'll do our best to support you. We will also have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation today. So please post any questions that you have in the Q&A feature of Zoom, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible towards the end of today's session. So let's kick off with some introductions. My name is Carmel Batticciotto. I'm the head of client partnering across APAC at LHH. I've been with LHH for almost 8 years now. Time flies when you're having fun, and I'm very passionate about supporting organizations through change and transformation, and have a particular interest in preparing organizations to future-proof their workforce, but to also increase their levels of career well-being and career agility, because we know that there are so many fantastic outcomes that arise based on this. So very excited to be here today and to present some findings from our recent global study. Also excited to be joined by Adam Malski, the Chief Transformation Officer for Reejig. Adam, did you want to take a few moments to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So very excited to be here. Thanks for having me along today. Adam Malski, I'm Reejig's Chief Transformation Officer. My career spans 20 years, pretty much in two halves. The first half was in management consulting. I used to work for Accenture, largely in global change and transformation programs across a number of different industries around the world. And most recently, my last 10 years was with Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and I headed up HR strategy and transformation, and I got to do some really cool, purposeful work. And as of just a month ago, I'm now at Reejig as our Chief Transformation Officer, and very happy to be here and look forward to talking to you today, everything about workforce agility, workforce strategy, and reskilling in particular.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam. So the format for today's session is that I'm going to spend a little bit of time sharing some results from a recent LHH global study, and then we'll hand over to Adam to talk through some really important questions in regards to reskilling, upskilling, and preparing your workforce for the future of work. So just to tell you a little bit more about the study before I start touching on some of the data. So with the onset of the global pandemic and all of the changes that have happened over the last 1 to 2 years, including an acceleration in shifts in the way that we work and working practices, the Adecco Group, which LHH is part of, launched a global study to provide insights on the attitudes, behaviours and outlook on the future of work. So the study included almost 15,000 participants over 25 countries. And as our working environments and attitudes towards work continue to evolve, it is so important for organisations to understand this and to adapt and flex their priorities, their working practices to align to the needs of their people. So you'll see that the results that I'm going to share today provide insights into working practices, behaviours and attitudes, and will hopefully help you as organisations to continue to evolve and adapt as we look forward to a post-pandemic world and new ways of working. So the first insight that is aligned to the topic we're speaking about today is that, yes, the skills gap is real, and we are hearing about this across studies from a range of organisations. Our particular study found that 64% of employees are concerned about not having relevant skills for the future. And 80% of employees say they believe they need to train and gain new skills to stay employable. And this also aligns to research that we've seen published by Gartner, where they've actually published that 20% of employees will have the skills needed for both their current role and their future career. Only 20%. So definitely demonstrating this concern about employees not feeling prepared for the future. And we also know that in the last future of jobs and future of work report by the World Economic Forum, they noted that 50% of employees will need reskilling by 2025 as technology adoption increases. So seeing that we're almost in 2022, that's a really scary statistic right there. You'll also see that 78% of employees have indicated that they would like their organization to have a clear talent and development strategy to help them prepare for their future roles. So to actually understand, well, where do I need to reskill? What type of skills do I need? How do I go about this? And we'll also be getting some great insight from Adam, talking through some of these points as well. So clearly there's an appetite to learn new skills. However, how do employees feel that their organizations are faring on this front? So do they feel supported to do this? Now, what I'm sharing with you today is actually a mixture of Australian data as well as global data. I know that we have a lot of attendees here in Australia today, so I thought it would help to also provide Australian-based data. And from Australian participants, 64% say their employer has encouraged time and resources for training and upskilling. 64% say their leaders have a learning or growth mindset, and only 63% of employees feel that their leaders have met or exceeded expectations in successfully supporting their career development expectations over the last 12 months. And this definitely aligns to trends that we're seeing. We know that a lot has happened in the last 12 months. We have seen a lot of organizations under cost constraints, have had to reduce budgets from a talent development point of view, haven't had the time to plan their priorities around this. And unfortunately, we are now seeing the result of this lack of focus on supporting and developing the careers of employees internally. So definitely an important consideration. There also does seem to be a disconnect between perceptions from a leadership and management front down to the employee level. So you'll see here that if we have a look at Australian data, and if we focus on this, this middle stat here, my company is investing effectively in developing my skills. Leaders, have rated this at 80%. These are senior leaders within the organizations we surveyed, whereas managers, which sit more at middle management and below, have rated this 72%. And 68% from individual contributors. So you'll see that from the individual contributor level right up to senior leaders, there is quite a gap there in perceptions. So clearly really important for organizations to understand this and this disconnect, and to look into where these perceptions are coming from, and to understand what strategies they can adopt to ensure that employees feel supported. From a global perspective, the good news is that Australia has fared, has experienced increased ratings. If I have a look at that same data set or question around whether companies are investing in developing their skills at a global level, individual contributors had rated their organizations 37%. So although Australia is doing well compared to other countries around the world, there's still some room for improvement there. And from a leadership point of view, we know that the last 12 months has been incredibly tough. And if we move to the next slide, you'll see that from a management point of view, 81% of managers believe that leadership training is very important to their roles. However, only 49% have actually participated in leadership training. So again, there seems to be a disconnect or gap there, and whether this is due to the lack of ability to prioritize development because of competing organizational demands, or leadership development is just not being offered, could be two factors causing this. And we've heard quite a bit about the Great Resignation. I recently read an article by Forbes which argued that this is actually the Great Contemplation, because the resignation rates haven't increased significantly yet in certain countries. However, what we are seeing and should be very concerned about is that there are a significant amount of employees saying that they're actually considering leaving their current organization, and for a number of reasons. And Adam and I were having a brief chat before this webinar and talking about flexibility in the hybrid workforce. And one of the reasons that employees are thinking about leaving their current employer is around seeking that flexible working environment. And you'll see this in some of the results in this graph today. The one that I did want to draw your attention to was this first bar graph around employees taking initiative and being proactive about their careers. So if there's anything that the last 12 months has taught us, it's that we are resilient, we are agile, we can be very adaptable. And this has increased confidence and helped individuals to understand what they're capable of and how important staying relevant is, and adopting a continuous learning mindset is. So you'll see that 84% of Australian employees have either considered or completed a new course, qualification, or engaged in some sort of professional development to continue that reskilling journey or embark on that reskilling journey to future-proof their careers. You'll also see that there is a significant amount of participants that are considering changing careers. So over half of the respondents indicated that, as well as indicating that they were seeking a role or an organisation with more flexible working options. If we compare this to global results, there are some similar trends. From a reskilling point of view or continuous learning point of view, the global data indicates that there is a lower percentage that have considered or completed some sort of learning and development or certification. And there are lower percentages in regards to moving to a job with more flexible working options or considering a career change. So we're definitely seeing this as a key theme globally, and especially the results in Australia have indicated this. So now that we've talked through some of the data from our global study and how this aligns to other research, it would be great to pick your brain, Adam, and hear about your experience on a couple of key factors that link to this. So yeah, it would be great to hear about your view, and especially on the reskilling and upskilling piece, and how much of a priority this should be for organisations.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carmel. And some really interesting data points there. I just want to check, can you hear me okay? Am I nice and clear?
Nice and clear.
Fantastic. All right. Well, on your point there around the adaptability and resilience of people that has been shown globally in the last nearly 2 years, I might go rogue and actually start with a question. I know that's probably not how we were planning on starting, but that point really resonated with me. So in the chat, could everyone answer this question? If you think about a retail customer service role, so someone in a retail customer service role, do you think it's possible for them to become a risk manager, a cyber analyst, or a data analytics analyst? If you just pop that into the chat, I'm interested. So no, yes, 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 exclamation mark. Someone's super passionate about that. Love it. Of course, with the right desire, depends. Alison, I wonder if you're a consultant. Depends. That was our standard response when I was a consultant. Is obviously you need to get more information if they want to. So I think what I'm seeing is a bit of a balance, but most people are leaning more towards the yes, and then quite a few people are saying with the right kind of attitude or right support. So anyway, park that for now. Thank you for answering. Lots of great responses there. So I appreciate you getting into the chat. So let's start with definitions of what we mean by reskilling and upskilling, because that's an area that I'm particularly passionate about. We'll dive into that as a particular area of focus today. So reskilling, what does reskilling mean? Reskilling is to gain new skills to prepare someone to take on a different role within the organization. So I just used an example there of a retail customer service. In the context of a bank, for example, that might be a branch manager or a customer service representative. The person that used to be the teller, customer service representative. Let's say they've spent 10 years in the branch, and after undertaking a reskilling into risk management program, they're now a risk manager in the retail bank. Right? That's an example of reskilling. So they've gone from quite a different role to something quite different. So X to Z, it's a different role. Upskilling is all about enhancing existing skills to increase their impact within their current role or area of expertise within the organization. So for example, a HR business partner. Lots of people on the call today from a HR background. HR business partner, say of 10 years, undertakes a communicate with impact course and joins Toastmasters to improve their communication. That's what we call upskilling. So it's tweaks within the role. Now, I just want to sort of baseline when I talk about reskilling. That's what I'm talking about, that first example, doing something quite different. Hence the question. So why is reskilling important? Well, this is an area that I am super, super passionate about. I believe it's a win-win-win. And I mean that from three different lenses. At a national level, reskilling supports economic development. And in cases at the moment with economic recovery, given everything that's happened in the last 20 months. Australia currently has an immigration shortfall. So typically we'd expect to add 250,000 people to our population each year. And of course, lots of those people are selected based on the skills that they have. And they're the skills that Australia as a country require. However, no surprise, given the border closures over since March 2020 last year to now, as things have started to open up ever so slowly, immigration has swung completely the other way. And so we're not used to that. We've actually had a net decrease. We've lost 100,000 people in 2021. So over the past decade, there's been real strong reliance on international migration and to fill our skills and needs in the technology in particular, that sector. That's risen, and with our domestic graduates completing IT tertiary education, that's declined. So that scenario was kind of somewhat working out okay for everyone, but then of course we put a pandemic into the mix and then things completely changed. So to complicate things a little bit further, while companies have increased the pace and focus on digital transformations in the past couple of years, the supply of overseas talent has essentially diminished. Now, that's creating a widespread imbalance of skills for organizations. And that is not specific to a particular company, a sector, or even, to be honest, a geography. Everyone's felt that. So there's this imbalance where you've got these huge spikes in skills for roles that are in demand, and the shortage of those skills has been heavily hamstrung. So, for example, if you have skills in a high demand area right now, such as cyber, software engineering, analytics, agile, good for you. I mean, you are globally employable. And, there are various statistics around any one of those roles. That doesn't matter where you put it from, World Economic Forum, job statistics bureaus, etc. There's almost 0% of people within that skill set who don't have a job if they want a job. So every industry, every geography, there's not enough talent quite simply to go around. So reskilling, let's go back to the crux of the point. Reskilling is great for the economy because it really fosters that recovery and growth, because it can do two things. Number one, it can reduce unemployment by providing new careers to people in jobs that may not exist in future. And second of all, it increases growth and innovation by filling those high demand jobs or hard to fill jobs with eager people who are keen to reskill. And the reason why I asked you that question at the start is that I had a strong belief when I led reskilling at Commonwealth Bank that almost anyone can reskill if you put the right support and foundations around them. And I'll come to the success of reskilling at CBA in a second, but it was really great to see that hypothesis did get proven correct. Now, I talked at a national level, and some degree a global level, at an enterprise level. So let's talk about at the company level. Reskilling is a viable source of homegrown talent into a high demand role. So you've also got this first mover advantage component as well for organizations who creatively think about where they can find the skills for these high demand jobs. And you can get ahead of any skill shortages with the help from a reskilling initiative. Now, according to PwC, very similar to the statistics that Carmel raised in her first slide, PwC, 74% of CEOs are concerned about the availability of key skills and believe that a shortage will constrain their growth. Very similar to the points, the 64% and the 80% statistics that Carmel shared from the Adecco study. And then the World Economic Forum statistic that Carmel raised is absolutely ringing true. The point of this is there are going to be millions of jobs, according to the World Economic Forum, that will be displaced, and a shift in labour between humans and machines. That's old news. That whole future of work concept that people were talking about in the last kind of 5 to 10 years. That is the reality. But there's so many new exciting jobs that exist as a result of new skills that are required. And that's what reskilling really plays to. It's less about the doom and gloom. It's more the flip side to that, to say, great, there are some roles that won't exist in future. That's just the way things are. But reskilling is a very, very realistic and viable source of talent. So I'm proud to have proven that reskilling does work at CBA. On one hand, you've got organizations who have hundreds of vacancies, open vacancies for these hard to fill roles. Let's just call that the demand. And on the other hand, you've got roles that are no longer required, as well as employees in roles that maybe they don't want to do those roles anymore for various reasons, whether that be change of heart, pandemic, whatever it might be. And we call that supply. So if you marry the two things up, supply and demand, the return on investment for reskilling is also incredibly attractive. So if you start to think about employees whose role may be impacted by redundancy, think about it in your own context. What's an average redundancy? Anywhere between 40 and 100K, depending on the industry, the tenure, etc. But it's a significant number. Plus the recruitment cost for that role. You've got, let's just say, even if you just had 100 roles that you could fill with reskillies, the maths becomes very, very attractive. And that was one of the ways that I positioned reskilling at CBA. But there's so much more to it. The example I just gave you, those numbers, that's a $10 million saving over a year for reskilling programs, obviously less the reskilling cost, which is a fraction. Less about the commercial initiative, the intangible upside of employee engagement, value proposition, IP retention, and just speed to putting people into roles, as well as knowing your culture fit, your value sets, and your customer. That's what's really important to organizations, but also to people now more than ever, to some of Carmel's points that she had raised. So that's at an enterprise level. Then the third lens that I like to put over it is at the individual level. So this is the bit that really gets me warm and fuzzy. And it was a very purposeful and grateful position that I was in leading reskilling at CBA. And I'm eternally grateful for the organization in funding and putting the trust in me to give that a go and prove it works, because employees want career paths and development opportunities. I mean, again, coming back to some of Carmel's stats, but we all know that. I mean, it's obvious. But do we actually provide them with real career opportunities? You know, most of the time it's, you know, people get career opportunities which might be a lateral move or a vertical move, but we're talking about fundamental shifts to people's careers, you know, doing something quite different. It's happened lots in the blue collar industries over years, but we have seen less of it in white collar because there's added complexities, which I won't go into now, but I'm sure we can all think of a few of them. Employees are looking for jobs with better, stronger career trajectories. They desire both recognition and development, and smart companies find ways to provide those opportunities. And as I said, not just the traditional paths. So in the context of Commonwealth Bank, we had thousands of people apply for, you know, any one of the reskilling opportunities. And that in itself is, you know, it is a great testament to how excited the organization or people in the organization were about reskilling, or are about reskilling. And if I'm completely honest, the way that we communicated reskilling programs was simply just through our internal communication channel, which is, you know, just think of it as our internal kind of Facebook landing page. Not everyone goes on it, but yet, you know, thousands of people applied out of a 45,000 person organization. So it wouldn't have got the most amount of readership, but still so many people applied. So people opting into reskilling, they were doing that because they wanted something new. And whether that because they're ready for a new challenge, bored of the current role, they saw that their existing role may not exist in future. There's many reasons. Whatever the reason that's driving that change, it's a true moment that matters for the individual. Now, if you think about key moments that matter for an individual, things like career changes, things like onboarding, things like exit, things like all those kind of key steps, they're the things that people remember, you know, the way that they're treated and the way they feel in those moments. And I believe they will now be a point of difference, very much a point of difference for both an employability perspective and a retention perspective. So one of my proudest moments in my entire 20 years was very much when I saw the reskillies at CBA secure roles in a completely new area of the bank. And the example, the question I asked you at the start around a retail employee in a customer service role, reskilling into an insights analytics role or a cyber role or an agile coach role, whatever it might be, it absolutely can happen. And the upside to the individual is the bit I just want to focus on just for a little moment now. So those successfully placed, they committed 100 hours over a 10-week period, an intensive 10-week kind of boot camp approach on top of the day job. And that in itself is a stretch for anyone. And I saw effort and sacrifice that the reskillies invested to pivot their own careers, especially during the recent lockdowns that people have had across New South Wales and Victoria. And I know that we've got an Asia Pacific audience on here, and that's been felt across that region. So those people, they had a day job during, you know, unprecedented times, as well as an extra 100 hours over 10 weeks of learning, which is a real stretch because it's something very different. People learning new skills, like completely new skills. It's taxing. Plus, then you throw homeschooling, etc., into the mix. You know, it was tough. But our retention rate of our reskillies going through that program maintained in the high 90%. Like people stuck through it, which is absolutely amazing given all the challenges that people were facing. So really happy to say that circa 70%, and in some cases a little higher, of reskillies who went through a program, who were successfully placed onto a reskilling program, found jobs in their new field within 6 months of completion of the program. Now, I still get really warm and fuzzy thinking about all of them and all their faces at the kickoff, where they were nervous and eager, you know, a little bit sheepish to speak up, you know, learning this new complete area, through to the early moments where, you know, the learning started to click. And I've got excitement of a lady called Shafat, real name, she doesn't mind me sharing this story, who was then a branch employee at the bank. And she's etched in my mind where she was first able to write, and this is actually only in the first 10 days, was able to write 15 lines of SQL code. And her sense of accomplishment, that she didn't even know what SQL was, other than the title of it, even just 10 days prior. And her sense of accomplishment was beautiful. Her joy, her smile was just infectious, not just to her peers who are reskilling on that program, to the people in the branch that she was working with, and even me, who was, running this initiative. It was just incredible to see. And that was the case across every single one of the reskillies. So they go forth then and do lots of project work. They go and get guidance from mentors, from buddies, and then we set them up with support from expert help from recruiters and executive coaches to help them get ready for job applications, whether that be CV writing or elevator pitch, but ahead of the assessment center type approach. Everything about that step and process has been a moment that matter and a true life-changing moment for every single one of those hundreds of reskillies who have been through that program and secured jobs. And I can tell you now, every single one of them, I have this unique bond and connection with, given that they've been through the trenches and they now have this new career that they are excited about. It's changed in many people's lives, their home life, how excited they are when they go back to work. They've got security around, they're now in high demand jobs. And that's their side of it. The business side of it is we had hundreds of vacancies that needed to be filled. And they were very hard to fill in the external market because everyone was looking for the same talent. So the reason why I said at the start, it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the individual, it's a win for the organization, and it's a win for the nation and more globally. And you can see I'm clearly passionate about the topic of reskilling, but the reason why I'm so passionate about it is for all of those reasons. I don't see any downside to it other than the fact it's a bit of effort. And we'll come to that in a moment when I sort of finish up with some clear sort of next steps and actions. But I'm personally now I'm at Reejig, going to create a reskilling playbook, and I look forward to sharing that to anyone who's considering reskilling as a strategic people initiative in their organization. And all you need to do is just add me or follow me on LinkedIn, and I will be publishing that at some point in the early next year. I've been at Reejig for just 3 and a bit weeks, so once I've fully kind of got my feet under the table, I'll turn my attention to that. But I would love to share that and impart any of my learnings around reskilling to anyone on this call. So I think for me, if I think then about reskilling as a why should you do it, I think for me it's a compelling yes across all of those 3 areas. And as I said, super passionate about it and always happy to speak to people and share my knowledge. Now, I'll pause there, Carmel. I know we've got a next step as well in terms of actionable strategies, but I'll just pause there and see if there's anything that you wanted to ask, challenge, question, or even if there's anyone in the chat who had something for us to consider.
Yeah, definitely. So if anyone does have any questions at this point, please feel free to type them into the Q&A. I do have one in the meantime, Adam. You mentioned that you feel that anyone is capable of reskilling and engaging in that career shift. Are there any trends that you saw or themes around the type of mindset needed to successfully go on that journey or behaviors?
Yeah, that's a great question. So before I get to that, I should qualify. I do believe that anyone can reskill into a new job, just like I believe that anyone can run a marathon, right? So it doesn't matter what body shape, size, etc. If you've got the mindset, anyone can do it. However, there are also some other parameters that an organization or individual would sort of self-select themselves in or out. And in the case of analytics, we were reskilling people into insights analytics, where you needed understanding of SQL, Tableau, and some basic Excel, but you just needed a critical mindset, someone who was interested in data, someone who was curious, attention to detail. They're the things that you need to be able to be an insights analytics role. In analytics, there's also at the other end of the spectrum, data science. Now, could you reskill someone who doesn't have that mindset or skills into data science? It would be hard, right? So, and that would probably be a 6 to 10 year journey to get to that position with that kind of skill set and starting point. So the qualification is around, with the right starting point, anyone can reskill. And that's why it's really important to target the right people with the right data, but then also get the right motivations in. So let me answer your question more specifically. What were the things that we believe to be really important? To be honest, it starts with a growth mindset, learning agility, and someone who's genuinely passionate about the space. Now, I know those three things are quite loose and quite high level, but if you take it back to the most basic things, the person's got to be up for it, because it's a big commitment to not just do the learning, 100 hours over a 10-week period while you're doing your own job, but also to change career into something completely different. You've got to be up for it. And the beauty about an expression of interest approach, which is definitely a bit more of an archaic way of finding people, but people select in. So people were selecting into the organization. That's right, into the reskilling programs.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that really resonates, especially the piece around growth mindset. And interestingly enough, that was one of the areas of the research study around employees perhaps not seeing their own leaders demonstrate that growth mindset enough, which we know is critical for leaders to set that example, but also create and foster that environment of continuous learning. I'm really keen to hear, I know that you've got quite a few points around those actionable strategies, because we are getting lots of questions or seeing confusion from an organizational level where they just don't have that future state workforce or the future capabilities defined, whereas we're seeing that disconnect between organization and leader level and the employee level. So yeah, it'd be great to hear your insights on that topic.
Yeah, again, very passionate about this. So let me start with a rhetorical question. Now, if you had a $2 billion asset with 20,000 components in it, you would absolutely want a data-driven approach to manage that asset. For example, if it had 20,000 components, which ones are operating effectively, which ones are rusty, which ones need upgrading, right? I think everyone would agree with that. Intelligent controls these days give insight to inform maintenance schedules and upgrades. So if you think about that from a manufacturing perspective, but that's no different to an organization of 20,000 employees. 20,000 employees, that's a $2 billion asset. It's the same example. But yet most organizations, if not every organization that we speak to from a Reejig perspective, doesn't know the skills that exist within it. They don't actually have a full three-dimensional view of the skills within it. And I want to start with a story on this one. And this is a real story, real name. The person is very comfortable with me sharing it. His name's Arjun. So 9 p.m. on a wet Sydney winter's night out in Redfern. This was about 6 months ago. I was speaking about reskilling opportunities at Careers Expo aimed at frontline staff in branches and call centers. And after the session, there was someone in the audience. He tapped me on the shoulder and he asked if we could chat. I said, absolutely, I'd love to. He said, I'm interested in reskilling into data analytics. And I said, oh, great. Tell me about yourself. Who are you and why are you interested? He said, well, my name's Arjun and I work in a call center. And I kind of just had this thing in the back of my mind at that point. I was thinking, how many recruiters or hiring managers would be thinking at that point, you're no fit for my analytics team. Now you're a call center guy. And then I just had that little thing in the back of my mind, wondering, that's interesting. And then at this point, I thought to myself, brilliant. But I reflected and I thought, there are recruiters, there are hiring managers who are starting to change their mindset. And I said, tell me, Arjun, why are you interested in reskilling into data analytics? He said, well, I love maths, I love data. I said, great. And he said, I've got a degree in applied statistics from Macquarie Uni, and I'm halfway through my master's in applied statistics. And I also taught myself Python and R. And for those who don't know what Python and R is, they're advanced programming languages for analytics. He said, in the last year. And I just thought to myself, I didn't think to myself. I said to Arjun, Arjun, you do not need to reskill into data analytics. You have everything and you're good to go, right? So this is someone who is passionate about stats. Now, not only has he done a bachelor's, but is halfway through his master's. He's self-taught himself Python and R, and he wants to do an analytics role. And he clearly has got no idea that we had, well, I won't say the number, but a lot of analytics roles open. And he was good to go, but there was this mass disconnect. So the organization didn't know anything about Arjun, and Arjun didn't know anything about the roles. So the reason for me sharing that story is it took chance for him to be there that night. No, fair play to him, 9 o'clock at night, after a frontline role, which aren't easy roles, he'd be emotionally tired, to go and listen to a reskilling presentation in the evening, and then have the courage to come and tap me on the shoulder and ask me all about the reskilling initiatives. Now, for me, that's bonkers. An organization of 50,000 employees, let's say it's 50,000 employees, that's a $5 billion asset in terms of people per year. And let's say it has hundreds of open vacancies or thousands of open vacancies, that the bias is always to recruit in the external market. And let's say in the context of analytics, it's really hard to find good people in the domestic market. And then you've got someone who's looking to get into analytics or ready to leave the organization. They just leave. And the thing is, it's, for me, that's a really sad fact. And the reason why I'm making this point is you've got someone there who's motivated, who already has the skills, doesn't even need reskilling. Imagine if you had the potential to really understand all of that data on the employee that gives you a three-dimensional view of the whole self, and all of the skills that they gathered through their whole life and careers, not just their existing job title, like a call center. That's where we get game-changing insights, where we can really start workforce agility and start to move people into roles. Huge upside for the individual. Arjun, and I tested this with him, I said, what would it have been like if we, as an organization, we're able to nudge you with a bunch of analytics roles that we thought you were a good fit for, or we identified a reskilling pathway for you to get into data analytics. And he said, oh, that'd have been brilliant. And just so it happens, he's left that organization now, because we didn't jump on him quick enough. But that's the context. So 2 things: actionable strategy, number 1, right? So first point, be relentless in getting hold of usable data and insights on the workforce and employees. The question is, how well do you know the skills of your people? And I don't mean, well, I know Sarah and she's good, or I worked with Raj a few years ago and he has X and Y skills. That's not scalable. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, how do you keep those skills up to date, real time, ones that aren't prone to biases? I worked with Raj recently. That's a recency bias. What about everyone else? So what I mean is, how well do you know the skills of your people, the entire workforce and the entire ecosystem? And organizations have been trending away from jobs and job titles as a currency, very much now towards skills. So what are the skills of the people? And certain skills are in hot demand in the talent market. The demand for those skills is always going to be evolving. They'll either grow or they shrink or completely disappear. So the goal is to have a dynamic and systematic method of obtaining 100% visibility of skills, potential, passions, experience, by enabling a culture of opportunity, and then you can give these nudges through to with your people. And what that does is it then will allow you to continuously and automatically and objectively understand all of the skills within the organization. That's the point where organizations are able to really enable workforce agility. With 100% visibility becomes a possibility that every individual has access to a meaningful career. And that means they can bring their best selves to work, and they can really fulfill their potential by providing informed career development, career pathways, meaningful and purposeful work, work-life balance, etc. Zero wasted potential. It's on my hoodie, not on my t-shirt, but that's one of the slogans we have at Reejig. That's where that becomes a reality. Zero wasted potential is where employees are able to go into roles that have the impact that they would never have had before. So think about any business scenario that are going to become more and more common. as we move into a faster pace, more uncertain VUCA world. Again, using kind of future work kind of terminology. Divestment programs, regulatory or enforceable undertakings, digital transformations, mergers and acquisitions, pandemic, cost simplification, which is important to every organization at the moment, general size and shape of the organization. Now, without 100% dynamic visibility, it's just hard work and labor intensive to work out who the skills are in your organization. And the second you've done it, it's out of date. So something needs to be dynamic and automated. So that's the first one. Relentless in getting hold of true workforce intelligence. Actionable strategy number 2, second and final one, build career mobility into the strategy of the organization and invest in it. And that second point is really important, the investing in it. So once you've invested in sourcing the data, investing in resources. So I was a dedicated, I wasn't actually dedicated, but I was in a role where I had a very, very clear remit around reskilling and built a team to be dedicated for reskilling at CBA. That's the only way that workforce agility can really, really happen. And then as soon as you get runs on the board, it pays for itself. As I mentioned, the return on investment is very, very large. So investing also means both sponsoring and funding the reskilling initiatives, and making sure that the organization is fully supporting mobility as a concept. Lots of lip service gets done around the topic of mobility, but true, genuine belief that at an enterprise level, it is good for the organization to move person A into role X, for example, as opposed to it being perceived as talent poaching, which is an older method. So they are my 2 key kind of actionable strategies, and I think I'll pause there, Carmel, to see if there's anything you wanted to add or challenge, or if we've got any feedback from the audience.
Definitely. So we've got a few questions that have come in, so I might read out a couple of them. Firstly, Adam, loving some of the language that you're using. So I think zero wasted potential is going to become my new slogan as well. And, culture of opportunity and meaningful careers, all just really emphasizes what an important and critical initiative this is. So one of the first questions that has come through is, what would you recommend as a tool or way to assess skills and capabilities within the organization, even before having identified critical roles and associated required capabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll answer the question, but then I'll give you my recommendation, and I'll start with the recommendation. I'd almost flip it around to work out what skills do you already have in the organization. And I mean, of course, Carmel, I don't want to come across today like this is a sales thing at all from Reejig, but which is going to sound like it is, because I'm now going to say what that is, but I can't get away from it. So a company like Reejig aggregates all of your data in your tech stack, whether that be from your applicant tracking system, your LMS, your HRIS, any tech system you've got that has people data. It then enriches all of that data with publicly available data, whether that be from various sites that have people's certifications, qualifications, and lots of other areas. It then aggregates that to give a 3-dimensional rich view of an individual. That almost mitigates the need to have a discrete skills assessment, because it gives you dynamic, real-time, rounded skills understanding of not just an individual or a particular cohort, but the whole company. So that's where, for me, that's the future. That's why I've left a great gig at CBA to join at Reejig, because I believe that I can have an impact not just on 1,000 people a year, but millions of people. So yeah, unfortunately, that has come across like I'm trying to push Reejig, which I'm certainly not. But if you go down the path to the specific question around what is a good sort of tool or skills assessment approach, I think you're always going to be going down a path of having lots of different vendors, lots of different assessments, and there's lots of work that employees need to do, and they don't want to do it. 10 to 20% of employees keep their profiles up to date internally, And as we all know, especially during the pandemic, employees have been so heavily surveyed around well-being and loads of other initiatives. I think the value of surveying and getting people to do assessments, you've got to have a really, really strong value prop to get people to do that now. So if you can do all that for them, which is what Reejig can do, it's just a win for everyone, because it's quicker, it's dynamic, it's systematic, and there's no effort on the employee. And then the leaders in HR get instant insight straight away. So hopefully that answers it in a slightly different way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam. The next question that we've received is around whether there's any kind of training agreement that should be proposed in relation to the reskilling program. So considering it's a long path and a high investment cost to the company. What are your thoughts on that?
Can I seek a clarification? What do you mean by the training? Are you talking about getting a clawback type? Oh, I think Adam just answered it.
Oh, okay. So that was in relation to Joe's question around the skills assessments piece.
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Do you mind going again, Carmel? Then maybe if the person who asked it could type in the chat if there's any clarification.
Yeah, so let me know if I've misinterpreted this correctly, but my interpretation is, whether there's any agreement with the employee, so around maybe it is a clawback or some sort of agreement around if you are going to invest in training or reskilling, what are their obligations? Yeah,
no, okay, I understand. So I interpret it the same as what you just said with regards to the clawback. So look, there's different ways you can approach that, right? So a reskilling initiative can cost anywhere between 6 and 10K, and that's a 10-week intensive boot camp, globally recognized certifications. Some people will hear that number on this call and other HR leaders, and they'll say, "Oh, that's a lot of money." No, that's halfway to an exec MBA, or that's X amount of exec coaching. And sure, it is, right? That's the cost of it. But it's an intensive learning program that, if supported well, gets the return on investment, as I proved at CBA. 70% of people going through it got jobs, and that's only within 6 months. I'm sure it's going to continue to increase. Personally, I don't like clawbacks, and I don't think any organisations really go for it. I think it's actually quite hard. They're quite hard, aren't they, to actually get the money back if someone decides to pull out or leave. I think the important thing is picking the right people, or getting the right people to select in, and then supporting them through the process, as opposed to going down the kind of like the stick approach if they don't complete it. And I've experienced people who did drop out of a reskilling program because it was the wrong choice. And great. That's great. That's great for the organization. That's great for them. They can go back and focus on their current role, or they go and do something different, which wasn't that. But it comes back to that selection up front. If you understand their motivations and you understand their skills, you're going to get the right people onto the program. We had, as I said, high 90% of people who started the program finish it. And so we never really faced that. But you can go down that path of formal clawbacks. You can go down the path of a commitment to say that you've got to finish it. But I didn't do either of those things, and we still got high 90%. There was like 98%, which means that there's one person dropping out per cohort. So personally, I'm against that, but I understand every organization has different perspectives and different culture towards that.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Adam. Okay, so I'm conscious of time, so we can always follow up any other questions post the session. Adam, you have shared so many insights today, and I've really loved the stories about individuals and how this approach has really changed their careers for the better, but also their lives. If you had to think of 2 or 3 key messages that you'd like the audience to leave with today, what would they be in relation to such a critical and complex topic as well?
Yeah, great. Thank you. So key takeaways for me is there's 2 things. Number 1, only with 100% visibility of your people skills, passions, experiences, and potential will you ever be able to achieve scalable mobility and workforce agility. You know, it sounds obvious, but without that data and visibility and insight, you can't do it. It's always going to be manual. It's always going to be clunky, and it's never going to be effective. You can make a dent, but you'll never get true workforce ability, mobility and workforce agility. You can't rely on that manual input from employees. As I said, 10 to 20% populate their profiles. So that's number one. You need 100% full visibility. And then takeaway number two is reskilling and mobility has tremendous upside. You know, you can hear that in the examples I've given. The return on investment and the intangible benefits. My takeaway is just go for it. Like if you, as a leader and you're a decision maker or part of your organization who's keen for this and a decision maker, just go for it. Invest in it. Reach out if you ever want to discuss some of the hurdles. Don't get me wrong, it's not easy, it's not straightforward, it is changing mindsets. A lot of it will be about change management and transformation, but I'm so passionate about this and just the general concept of zero wasted potential in people, business, and society. Reskilling, mobility, and getting full visibility of your people is the way to do that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure you've left the audience with a lot to think about and many insights. For anyone who's joined our session today, as I said, if we haven't been able to get to your question, we will follow up, and please feel free to reach out to myself or Adam if you'd like any further information or have any additional questions on anything that we've spoken about today. We will be sharing a copy of the recorded session, so you will have access to that post today. And wishing everyone a fantastic Friday afternoon and a fantastic weekend as well. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Adam.